Alright, so I want to take a moment and cover some of the importances of having version control for GitHub set up in PhpStorm when developing plugins for PocketMine. I'm going to be using the Prime Games dev team setup particularly, but this applies to any other setup that you're doing that uses PocketMine plugins and development for PocketMine plugins. Part of what I'm going to do here requires some things to already kind of be out of the way. One of those is that you should be comfortable setting up a development environment in general. If you're not comfortable setting up a PocketMine server on whatever operating system you use for your development stuff, you should probably go check out a couple videos before doing this to get familiar with that process. There are some other videos that show how to set up PhpStorm for this, and I'm going to do those things in this video, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining what I'm doing, so it may be very difficult to keep up with if you're not familiar with those processes. The other things that I'm expecting is that you've already installed Git for whatever operating system that you're using. I'm working inside of Windows, and I'm particularly running on Windows 10. So I've installed the Git binaries for Windows so that all of those functions and features are directly available from my command lines. And the next thing that you should have is that you should have your GitHub logins already created before this. So you should have authenticated or verified your emails, whatever is necessary to be able to log in and start using GitHub for the first time. And if you haven't done those things, then you're going to have a little bit of trouble keeping up as we get started and moving. So here we go. I'm going to create a new project, and we're going to call this Prime Games Demo. This is just a blank slate, empty project. There's no pre-built anything in this other than just some of the basic PHP options. And before I get started doing anything else, we're going to make some changes to some of the settings. PocketMine-MP uses PHP 7.2. I think that I've already set my defaults up for this, but if you haven't, it's a good idea to go ahead and change this. Make sure that this is good. Click Apply. And then the next thing that's going to be fairly important is that your version control options, that you select your GitHub and set up this section right here. And you can see that I've already done it. And once you do it the first time, it usually carries over into all your other projects. But I've already signed in. If you haven't, there's going to be a login box here with a username and a password where you can generate a new API token for your project. I highly recommend using the API token instead of using your password stored in the project. You're more likely to have less security issues with the token than you are if you store your password. So once you've got those changes made, click Apply and then OK, and we're ready to set up the rest of the environment. We're going to come back to those settings a few more times, but there are other things that we have to do first. All right, so open your terminal down at the bottom. This is going to put you in the directory that the project is already in. Start you right at that point. And we are going to clone PocketMine directly. I'm going to go grab the link for that out of the installation documents. And again, I'm not going to walk through too much of this directly, but this is just a basic git clone command with a recursive flag for the PocketMine directory. The recursive flag, and I'm going to talk about this for a minute in a little bit of depth, is incredibly important here. Notice the -- recursive at the end of the command. The PocketMine-MP repository has got some things in the setup that they use that are submodules that if you don't install those submodules as you're going, you're going to run into some problems. And you can see that it's still cloning down here at the bottom. It's added the PocketMine-MP folder for me, and we're going to drop the PHP binary that goes with this build directly into the same folder that PocketMine is in. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's change directories into the PocketMine directory. And we're going to install all of the dependencies that are handled by Composer. when this gets finished, we'll be immediately ready to run a PocketMine server directly inside of PhpStorm. And this is so incredibly helpful for running a development environment. Notice that I'm already getting the setup wizard. We're going to use the default options, but we're going to run into a problem here in just a minute. We accept the license, skip the wizard, and hey, here's a problem. So if you have not set up a development environment since the release of the 3.0.0 versions, if you're still on the 1.7 dev 3.0.0 alpha 12s or alpha 11s or any of the other alphas that were in that series, then you won't have run into this issue. This is new as of 3.0.0. So there's an option that we have to change in PocketMine.yml. We're going to open this up and take a look real quick. And immediately at the very top of this, if you're doing this for the first time, you're going to have Enable Dev Builds show up right there at the bottom of your first set of settings. We need to change this to true. And then run this again. It's going to have you go back through the wizard. Yes, we accept the license. Yes, we want to skip the wizard because we're okay with default options. You're going to get this on Windows. You may get other similar things with Mac OS or Linux. I'm not 100% certain on those. But definitely on Windows you're going to get this, and I'm going to point this out. I highly suggest that you allow the CLI that's showing here, particularly the PHP binary that you're using in just this project folder, to talk on your public and private networks, especially if you're developing on a laptop, because you never know where you're going to be connected to the internet. And the last thing you want to do is be in the middle of trying to debug a plugin or some other piece of code that you're working on, and you can't log into your test server to test your changes because the firewall is blocking you and you forgot that this option should have been set up or that you needed it, and you are on a different network type than what you've initially allowed. So if you go ahead and allow all network types right here, you don't run into that problem in the future. And because this is a PHP binary that you're going to have an extensive amount of control over, it's only going to be running whenever you're in your development environment and doing things, then it should be pretty safe to allow without having any other complications. In other circumstances, I would not recommend doing that. All right, so we can see that the PocketMine server is already running. It's already generated its first world. And we can see there in the window, right here where the mouse is at, that we are running 4.0.0 development version. This is bleeding edge as it gets. That's as new as it can possibly be. And we do not want to develop for 4.0.0. And this is where version control inside of PhpStorm becomes very helpful. So we're going to stop the server. Most of the development that anybody that is developing plugins should be doing is for stable releases. I really can't reiterate that enough, which is again why version control is so important. If you are constantly developing on bleeding edge, then you are developing for an API that is not complete, which means that you're going to be changing things constantly to keep up with the updates that are coming out from PocketMine, and your source code will never be smooth. Ever. So we're going to come up to VCS. This is our version control options. Depending on whether or not you've done this before or not, you're going to have some options here or maybe not have some options. I don't have the ones that I'm expecting to have, so I'm going to show you how to get all that set up. We're going to come over to File and Settings, and we're going to make some changes in our version control setup. When you installed your PocketMine repository and did all of your Composer installs and everything, this may have shown up as a registered root for you already. If it didn't, just select the unregistered root, click plus, and apply. That's one of the first steps of really getting some of this started. The next thing that's going to be really important is that under directories, for the PocketMine directory itself, you need to set this as a resource root and click apply. Those two things are going to make a huge difference in what it is that you're going to be doing as far as your development stuff is concerned. It'll help eliminate a lot of the errors that are going to show up in your plugins, and will just in general make everything much better for what you're doing. All right, so if we come back and look at version control, notice that I have some different options now that were not here before. And and we can go change branches directly from these options. I don't have to try to run a terminal command or a command from the interface to try to do this. I can do it directly from the version control setup, which gives me the chance to actually browse everything that's there too. So I clicked down at the bottom, see more, and there were 27 additional branches for PocketMine. Particularly, what I'm looking for is the release versions, and they start with origin/release, and we're going to start with the highest released version, which is 3.2. So we're going to check this out as, and I'm just going to leave the branch name the same so that I know which version of PocketMine I'm working with. Once you've done that, you'll get little messages down at the bottom that let you know what's happened with your version control stuff. But if we run the server again now, you can see right there we're now on 3.2.0. It's that quick to change back and forth between versions of PocketMine and to do testing on different versions. And as additional branches are created for other pull requests where you may need to test your plugins against a specific branch, it's that easy to change back and forth from a stable branch or a released branch to a test branch to a development branch to whatever, based on what your needs are for what you're developing. So that's one of the first things that's significantly helpful. Let's take a look at some of the other things that are really important. So we're developing plugins. One of the things that's going to be really important with this is that all of our source code needs to be version control track 2. And so we're going to go grab a couple of things. We need dev tools. That's one of the things that we're definitely going to have if we're going to be developing inside the environment itself. Go grab that from the Jenkins server real quick. We're going to put this in our plugins folder. Come back to PhpStorm and make sure that it loads on the server. DevTools loaded and enabled, so we're good there. So let's start grabbing some of our source code from our GitHub repositories. We'll start with Player Vaults. It's right here at the top. On Prime Games, this is a copy that was forked from the original author so that we could watch and look at changes and make custom changes if necessary. You can download copies directly from the original author as well. So this little button right here will copy the link directly to your clipboard. Come back to PhpStorm, and before I ran the git command here in the terminal, and the reason that I ran it here instead of using the version control options that were available is because I needed the recursive flag for cloning the PocketMine repository. And this is the only time that I ever run a clone command or a branch change command or any other git commands directly from the terminal unless there are other very specific requirements. Almost everything else that I do is done through the user interface with the VCS options that are provided by PhpStorm because they're very, very helpful. All right, so we're going to clone the repository that I was just talking about. We're going to paste in the URL that we got from GitHub, and then down here at the bottom where we've got our directory set up, we need to fix this to make sure that it goes in the right place. And for those of you that are really familiar with using standard Windows interfaces, this is going to be very straightforward stuff, selecting a folder. Helps if I select the right one though, I guess. There we go. And then create a folder specifically for Player Vaults. Down at the bottom, we get the notice for the cloning process. It's going to ask us if we would like to open the directory. The option for this is no. The majority of the time that you're going to be doing any development with this stuff, you're probably going to do it in this project. If you open this directory, it's going to create a new project for that plugin, and it won't have all of your setup stuff from this project, you'll have to go through and set it all up again. So we're going to tell it no. All right, if we look in our plugins folder now, we should have a Player Vaults folder that was not there before with all of the source code from that repository. And again, this is where things get really interesting as far as trying to do some of the other things that are really necessary for what's going on. So at this point, let's take a look at some of the testing options that are available and why version control like this is so helpful. We're going to start the server again. Notice that it couldn't load the plugin Player Vaults because the API is incompatible. All right, well, let's take a look. Pull up plugin.yml, and sure enough, incompatible API. And we'll take a look real quick at the different folders that are available. We don't have any errors showing up right away. It's telling us an undefined namespace, and this is because Player Vaults uses a Virion, and I'm not going to go through the process of setting up Virions. But for this to work properly in the environment, you would have to have that Virion working as well. We're not going to go through the process of hunting it down at the moment. We're going to just look at some of the other things that are here, though. You can see the other errors that are coming up. And some of this is because my setup isn't correct yet for using MySQL or other similar database types. But one of the things that is going to become necessary is I'm seeing that we have a lot of async tasks, and the declared plugin version for this was for Alpha 11 and Alpha 12, and the change from Alpha 12 to the released 3.0.0 included some changes to how schedulers and async pools worked. And so we definitely are going to have some API changes here that are going to require us to drop support for anything that was previous to 3.0.0 if we're going to do this update. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of the things that are going to be in the way. Let's take a look at what else we've got here. Right here. This is what I was expecting to find. So previously, the schedulers for any of your tasks were found in the server scheduler. Well, the server doesn't have its own schedule anymore. It's been handed off so that each plugin has its own scheduler, with the exception of Async Tasks. And now you have a different API for Async Tasks. I'm putting a space here so that I can use the autofill commands. And we're going to do get, and right there at the beginning of the list is the get async pool, which is exactly what I was looking for. And from that, we're then going to submit a task, which is the replacement for schedule async task. And that should fix it. And any other of the changes that we would do would include things of that nature. But once we did all of our changes, we'd be able to go back to our terminal and test these things. Let's say that we want to commit this update. So at this point, there's a couple options. Let's say I've gone through and I've done everything here that I need to do, and I want to submit all of my changes in one update. You can come over to your project listing where all your files are listed at, and it shows you all of the things that are different from what was originally in the repository. And from here you can directly make those changes if you'd like. Or you go, oops, I made a mistake. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and do this because I did make a mistake. One of the things that you should do before making any changes that you commit to a repository, so you should create a separate branch for those changes so that they can be put through a pull request instead of committed directly to a master branch. By having your own branch for those changes, it gives you an opportunity to kind of see what those are before making a commit directly to the primary branch that's being followed, which means that anybody that might be watching the repository, whether it be other project members or team members that are helping you work on it, or whether it be just other people in general public that are watching what you're doing, those people are going to have an opportunity to see what those changes are and whether or not the things that they're currently working on will fit with those changes. We'll cover some more about pull requests in another video, but this is an important process step. So let's fix that problem. I made these changes, and I can see that I made these changes. I need to fix that. So let's come up to the root folder for Player Vault. So we're going to right click on this and check out one of our Git options here. There's a revert option. And if I click revert, it's going to show me all the files that were changed and give me an option to put them back the way they were at the beginning of this branch, up to the point of where the last commit was. I'm going to click revert, and it's going to fix all my files for me. And you can see that if we pull up plugin.yml, it's been changed. The provider that we were on, it fixed it back to what it was to begin with. That's just one of the many advantages and features that are available in the version control portion that are very helpful inside of PhpStorm. So let's look at another option. We've got branches that I showed you before, where we could get a branch from PocketMine. And notice now that because I've added player vaults, that it's listed in my repositories. So instead of having the full list for PocketMine here, we now have these little sub branches that we can choose from, or subsections that we can choose from. So let's create a new branch for player vaults. This could be a fairly interesting process if you were doing it from the regular commands, or if you were doing it through GitHub itself. And this is going to be really easy with PhpStorm. So we're going to call this one test. We're going to stop our PocketMine server for the moment. And we're going to update all of the things real quick that are supposed to be the 3.0.0 compatible stuff. And we primarily are going to be dealing with async tasks here. So let's go back and do what we did before. We're just going to do it again on this branch instead of on the master branch. So we go into plugin.yml. We're going to change all of this stuff here because support is not going to be available for the changes that we're making. We are making API changes that are not available in versions before 3.0, so all of the alpha versions will not support this. We'll come back to, I think it was our provider or Player Vault itself. We're going to look for every instance of Git Scheduler, Git Async Task. We're going to swap these out with Git Async Pool, Submit, Task. So let's just copy that. We know that's good because it auto-filled for us and the error went away. And let's just look for the other versions of Git Scheduler. And look, there are two more down here. We're just going to replace those. I've already looked through some of this before, and so I know that that should be the only other places that we had issues. And again, I'd pointed out previously that we've got an error listed up here, one that would normally be fatal, because we don't have the tools necessary for doing Virion plugins installed at the moment. So I'm not going to work too much on trying to show how to set up Virions. It's for another video. But primarily, we've made our updates. We're happy with these updates, and now we need to commit these updates so that other people can look at these things and we can properly submit a pull request. So you see we've got our files listed over here. They've turned blue, and if we come up to Player Vault's folder, we can right click. We're going to look at our Git options for this now. And there's a commit directory option here. We can either commit the entire directory at one time, or we can commit individual files on the fly by clicking on the file in the left pane over here. Go to Git and select Commit File. Sorry about that. Or you can right click on the tab for the file, and then there should be a Git option there as well down here at the bottom, Commit File. We're going to submit the entire thing though, because all of these changes are directly related and you can't have one without the other. If we update to 3.0.0 in the plugin YML declaration, then you're going to have the matching changes in provider. And if you make the changes in provider that are compatible with 3.0.0, you'll have to have the plugin.yml changes. So we're just going to commit all that at the same time. So we're going to commit the whole directory. And here we're going to be given and presented some options. I'm going to point out some of the things that are really important with this. I don't know if you've ever done a lot of work in a piece that you were working on and have needed to separate those changes out and document them for some reason. This is one of the most amazing features for how this works with PhpStorm. Let's say that I wanted to individualize all of these updates. Let's say, yeah, I'm trying to commit the entire directory, but I don't want to commit all of these files. You'll notice that plugin.yml here is not checked. Maybe I do want to commit it. Maybe I don't. It's as easy as checking the box to determine whether or not you want it to be submitted with this commit version. In addition to that, in each individual file, some of the changes are broken down for you. You can individually submit each change that's listed here by checking or unchecking the checkbox that's on the line that goes with those changes. And sometimes this can help you keep a large number of changes kind of separated. You can sort those large changes out into smaller commits to help track your updates and to document more appropriately what it is that you're doing. So the other thing that this could be useful for is in the event of needing to test in steps. You'll have commit versions that you can go back and look at for each step to make sure that you didn't make a mistake in one of your specific updates. So for this, though, we're going to commit everything. We know that these changes are good. And you get an opportunity to put in your commit message. We're going to make this real obvious. Update async task scheduling to 3.0.0. And we have an opportunity to commit. It's going to let you know if there are some problems in your code, and if you have some issues that need to be potentially looked at or changed or resolved, it'll give you an opportunity to stop what you're doing before you make that final commit, before you actually say, yes, we're going to send this in, and change any of those things or look at what those errors are before you submit for a commit. This is a safety step to help ensure the fact that you're not committing to bad code, and if your environment is set up properly, this can be very useful. We're going to go ahead and commit this because we know that some of the other errors that we're dealing with are not functional problems. Now that we've committed, we could continue making more commits if we wanted to for other functional or feature updates or whatever to this branch, but primarily we're done at the moment. So let's go ahead and push these changes. Now the difference between a commit and a push, if you're not familiar with Git options, is when you make a commit, the commit stops your repository at a certain point in your code and creates a version control document number. A hash number is what's used on GitHub to control those, and I believe there's also a hash in just standard Git. But instead of you having to try to control the document's version number yourself, by creating that hash number, you have at least a point in time that you know that you can go back to and look at, and there's a unique identifier associated with that. So we've gone to push, and the difference between that commit and a push is that making the commit doesn't actually put the code on your repository. It stays local, and if you don't push those changes to the repositories online, then nobody else will be able to see those. And so by pushing those, you're actually getting them out on the internet in your repository in GitHub, and so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and push these up to our GitHub. So once you get done with that, you'll get your messages down here at the bottom that tell you if you've finished with your commit or if you've properly made your commit, or whether there were any errors and whether or not your pushes have finished. So if we come back and take a look at the player vaults, you can see that it just got the test branch and that there were changes made, we could take a look at this and set up a pull request from here now that we have the code on GitHub, that kind of thing. But this is just the beginning of all of the things that version control can do for you in PhpStorm. But it should have already shown how incredibly helpful it is to be able to just swap from one version to another inside of a branch, or to do some of the other really important things like setting up new branches, testing code, that kind of thing, some of the revert options. And there's lots and lots and lots of other features that are available for version control with Git and GitHub in PhpStorm. Like I said, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here, but this is the process of getting you started. So hopefully you've seen how valuable that this is as a tool inside of PhpStorm, and you'll start to use this more frequently, or this will be something that will become part of your routine for doing development, because I use it with everything that I do. Every plugin that I work on has some form of version control association with it on my GitHub stuff, to make it much easier for me to keep up with where I'm at. So if you've got any questions, feel free to send me an email, or hit me up on Discord, or leave a comment below, and I'll do what I can to answering any questions. But this should cover everything for you at the moment. And then look for some of the other videos that I've got coming out that'll show how to do things like the pull request that I kind of alluded to a minute ago. And there are also some of my previous videos and maybe some upcoming videos that demonstrate more of the features of having a properly set up development environment for PocketMine when developing plugins. But that should cover this for today. Again, any questions, feel free to hit me up. We'll talk to you later. Thanks.